gains an opening of the mind, placidity of the mind. Suppose there is a little water in a puddle, then a person might arrive, afflicted and oppressed by the heat, weary, thirsty, and parched. He would think, this little bit of water is in the puddle. If I try to drink it with my cupped hands or from a vessel, I will stir it up, disturb it, and make it undrinkable. Let me get down on all fours, suck it up like a cow, and depart. He then gets down on all fours, sucks up the water up like a cow, and departs. So too, when a person's bodily behavior and verbal behavior are impure, but from time to time he gains an opening of the mind, placidity of the mind. On that occasion, one should not attend to the impurity of his bodily and verbal behavior, but should instead attend to the opening of the mind, the placidity of the mind he gains from time to time. In this way, resentment toward that person should be removed. So this is the case when someone still has a few good qualities left, but they are hard, they are few, and they are maybe hard to even see. The idea here with someone who gains an opening of the mind, placidity of the mind. The idea here is the Pali word is vivarana, is the opposite of nivarana. Nivarana is the 5 hindrances, right? So vivarana means opening, is the opposite of hindrances. So sometimes against purity of the mind. Sometimes the mind becomes clear, right? The hindrances are gone. That's what it means. So sometimes you know that of people. Sometimes they become quite pure and still and peaceful, even though they may have other bad qualities in their life. So we focus on that. And again, it's very narrow, right? And this is the whole point of the simile here. It's a very kind of narrow field of awareness. So you have to be very careful. Like the simile says, there's a little bit of water there. The water, again, is the thing that make your thirst and your weariness disappear. Thirst and weariness, again, is a simile for the anger, right? Or the upset. It makes you feel bad. So you see this tiny little beautiful water there. But you have to be very careful. If you use your hands or a cup, then you will stir up that water. In other words, unless you focus very narrowly, you focus a little bit to the left, a little bit to the right, you will see the bad qualities again, and then it will stir up even the good qualities, and you won't be able to focus on that. So you're very, very careful. But the point is that this can be done, right? This is more difficult than the other ones because you're now looking at a very narrow field of good qualities, but because they're there, the point is it can be done. And this is what you have to then make an effort to kind of move in that direction. But then, fortunately, there is a fourth way, and the fourth way is the kind of when things get very hard and all you can see is negative qualities, you can't see anything good. It's good that this is included here, otherwise it will be very hard to do this sort of practice. So, this is the fourth way, not the last one, the fourth way. It goes as follows. And how, friends, should resentment be removed toward the person whose bodily and verbal behavior are impure and who does not gain an opening of the mind, placidity of the mind from time to time? Suppose a sick, afflicted, gravely ill person was traveling along a highway, and the last village behind him and the next village ahead of him were both far away. He would not obtain suitable food and medicine or a qualified attendant. He would not get to meet the leader of the village district. Another man traveling along the highway might see him and arouse sheer compassion, sympathy, and tender concern for him, thinking, "Oh, may this man obtain suitable food, suitable medicine, and a qualified attendant. May he get to meet the leader of the village district. For what reason? So that this man does not encounter calamity and disaster right here." So too, when a person's bodily and verbal behavior are impure, and he does not gain from time to time an opening of the mind, placidity of the mind, on that occasion one should arouse sheer compassion, sympathy, and tender concern for him, thinking, "Oh, May this venerable one abandon bodily misbehavior and develop good bodily behavior. May he abandon verbal misbehavior and develop good verbal behavior. May he abandon mental misbehavior and develop good mental behavior. For what reason? So that with the breakup of the body after death, he will not be reborn in the plane of misery, in a bad destination, in a lower world, in hell. In this way, resentment toward that person should be removed. So here is the person who is, you cannot really see anything good in them. And I think it's useful to remember that sometimes, although you cannot see anything good in someone, it doesn't necessarily mean it isn't there. Very often it's just our own perception, because we have been learned to see a person in a certain way. Often it's good to remember the limits of our own perceptions, right? If you ask two different people how they view a person, they will often give very different answers on how they view that person. One will say, oh, that's a great person. One will say, that's a miserable person, right? Our biases are so strong, it's almost impossible to see things neutrally. So this is one thing that's important to remember. So this here refers to our own biased perception, is what this really refers to here. We are not able to see anything good there. It doesn't necessarily mean there's nothing good there. In the future, when your perception changes, you might be able to use one of the other methods here. But anyway, for the time being, we're not able to see anything good in this person, right? And then what do you do? And this is such a beautiful thing. Instead of then getting upset or angry and saying bad things about this person behind their back or whatever. No, instead, you regard them as someone who is sick, right? Someone who is ill. So how do you feel about someone who is ill? If someone really is sick, they got a serious illness, they can't really move. We really had recently had one of the Anagarikas had a bypass operation in hospital. Amandus, someone who may not know Amandus, he's like the eternal Anagarika at Bodhinyana Monastery. He's been an Anagarika for 30 years or whatever, or is it more perhaps? I can't remember. He's been around way before I came to Bodhinyana Monastery. But what do you do when he suddenly gets ill, he gets really sick, right? The eternal Anagarika who's always been there, always supporting, always helping out, has been very generous over the years, right? Okay, he has his faults, everybody has their faults, but there's so many wonderful qualities with Amandus. Then he goes to hospital, and everybody goes to see him, right? Everybody goes to hospital because everybody has a sense of compassion. It's not his fault that he's sick. Not really. He has been living a fairly healthy life, eating healthy food, and still his arteries have been clogging up, and he had to have a bypass operation. So it's natural. You feel compassion with people in that situation. And someone who is a bad person is exactly the same. They are bad, not because they want to be bad, but because, again, of causes and conditions. And then you realize they are basically sick, they're ill. They don't understand what is good for themselves, right? If you don't understand what is good for yourself, if you are deluded about what really is important in life, what is going to be for your own happiness and for the happiness of others, if you are deluded about that and you are practicing for your own suffering, does anyone really want to practice for their own suffering? The answer is no, right? Nobody wants to create suffering for themselves in the future. It's madness. So if someone does that, you know that they're deluded. You know like they're ill, they are sick, they don't really understand what's going on. And again, this can give rise to a sense of compassion for someone who is deluded. It's a wonderful way of looking at it, right? This person is ill. They don't understand what is good for themselves. And he doesn't get to see, have a qualified attendant, right, or qualified medicine. It's like the Dhamma or a good teaching coming around saying, listen, you're causing suffering for yourself and for others. See if you can change your ways. He doesn't have that. Perhaps he has only bad conditioning, bad friends, people giving him bad advice all the time. So he gets kind of led astray, right? He gets led in the wrong direction. This is part of the problem here. And then perhaps someone comes along, a good attendant comes along and helps him and nurses him and then makes him see the error of his ways. This is what this is about. And then you can have a sense of compassion, right? May he abandon that bad behavior. May he develop good behavior. May he be freed from this affliction that he's creating for himself. I like this phrasing here by Bhikkhu Bodhi, so that he does not encounter calamity and disaster. I think this word calamity is really is quite good. It's obviously it's a very kind of strong word, but it kind of tells you something that actually I think is very to the point, right? If things really go wrong, then sometimes they go wrong in a very, very bad way. And for a person, for your individual self, it is like a calamity. Your world is collapsing, right? It is a real calamity when things go really wrong in this way. So there you are. So this is what happens. And then he's heading, of course, from a Buddhist point of view, he's heading. He has lots of trouble in this life already. That's really enough to have compassion for him. But beyond that, he's also heading for a bad future destination as well, from the Buddhist point of view. So every reason to have a sense of compassion. So this is very, very, very useful to keep in mind, that there is always that sense of compassion to be had when you see many bad qualities in someone. So you can see here, though, that the idea is, and this is quite interesting with this particular sutta, the idea is, as far as it is possible, before you go to the compassion side, you try to find the good qualities first, right? You don't go to the compassion too quickly. You try to see the good qualities first. That's interesting, isn't it? Sometimes it's easy to think, oh, I'll just have compassion, I won't really make the effort to try to see the good things. But no, we should try to see the good things first before we move towards having a sense of compassion. It's very interesting. I think the reason for that is because the problem with compassion, when you look at because compassion is looking at the negative things and then wishing someone well, may you be free of suffering. But by looking at the negative things, it is very easy to feel a sense of despair about the world. Oh, it's so negative, it is so bad, there's so much kind of, so it's sometimes it can be hard to distinguish between compassion and just a sense of despair and things being bad. So to avoid that trap at despairing at the bad things in the world, you learn instead to focus on the goodness. There is a lot of goodness in the world, right? There are a lot of good people out there. People do have a lot of good qualities. So let's focus on those first of all. There is no danger with this kind of metta. There is no danger of falling into the negative, despondent state where you think everything is so bad. When you see the good in somebody else, all you can feel is happy. There's no danger there. Whereas with compassion, there can be a little bit of danger. And this is why the metta always comes first. And the compassion is actually more difficult. It takes more wisdom to be able to do compassion properly. It takes enough wisdom to have metta, because it's quite hard. It takes a lot of development to have metta towards other people, but even more wisdom to do compassion properly. So remember that. Metta comes first, then compassion afterwards. Okay, so that is how to deal with this kind of person. That is to deal with someone who is very hard. And then comes the last one. This is like the saintly person. And it goes as follows. How, friends, should resentment be removed toward the person whose bodily and verbal behavior are pure, and who from time to time gains an opening of the mind, placidity of mind? Suppose there were a pond with clear, sweet, cool water, clean with smooth banks, a delightful place, shaded by various trees. Then a man might arrive, afflicted and oppressed by the heat, weary, thirsty, and parched. Having plunged into the pond, he would bathe and drink, and then, after coming out, he would sit or lie down in the shade of a tree right there. So too, when a person's bodily and verbal behavior are pure, and from time to time he gains an opening of the mind, placidity of the mind, on that occasion one should attend to his pure bodily behavior, to his pure verbal behavior, and to the opening of the mind, the placidity of the mind that he gains from time to time. In this way, resentment toward that person should be removed. Friends, by means of a person who inspires confidence in every way, the mind gains confidence. So this is the person where there's all kind of good qualities there. And of course, the interesting point is that you still have to remove resentment toward that person, right? It's not as if just because someone is pure, you won't get upset with them. You still get upset with them. That's just the nature of things. It doesn't matter. And the reason, of course, is because it usually resentment often has to do with us rather than with the other person. But because they have so many good qualities, it's relatively easy to switch your perception and see the goodness instead of seeing the bad things there. So you see the goodness. It's fascinating in the suttas. You see people being upset with the Buddha, right? And this has always been like that. You see people yelling at the Buddha. There's one sutta in the Sutta Nipata where this Brahmin comes up to the Buddha and yells at the Buddha and tells him off. And the Buddha is, of course, pretty unflappable and says that, all this anger, I don't take it on board. It goes back to you again. You are the one who receives this anger, not me. And so sometimes we have to be careful when we get angry with someone like the Buddha. It it really comes back to us usually. So, but of course, in this case, it's quite easy. So we focus on the good sides instead. And when you're able to see the good sides in someone who is very pure, and it's good to do that, to remember that, someone who is very pure, to focus on those good sides. And this actually can give rise to a lot of confidence, right? A lot of a sense of, as it says here, what does it say? By me, inspires confidence in every way when you're able to see the good qualities in someone else. But you have to focus on that. It's so easy to forget. In daily life, you see somebody around all the time, and sometimes you see things that may not seem right, or some things you don't like, or whatever. And just remind yourself of all the underlying good qualities that are there. And then when you remind yourself of that, when you build that up, then you can get a lot of, it can be a very beautiful thing that inspires you on the path. I've always found with the Buddhist teaching, one of the beautiful things about the Buddhist teaching is precisely that to me it is still alive, right? You can still find people in this world today who are very pure, who are very beautiful, have so many good qualities. And when you see that, you feel, wow, it is possible to do something like this. It's possible to practice this path. It still works. If you just read a book, you take the suttas, it all sounds very good, but it's very theoretical when it's just on a page. But when you see it, when you see someone like that, you think, there's something here. There's something very powerful here. And that can be very, very inspiring. To me, that without that inspiration of seeing the living example, it is a bit like the Dhamma is dead. Just having the text is not enough. So when you see that it actually works. So see that, be careful, watch people, don't allow yourself to be carried away by very superficial things. Look at the deeper things. And if someone is worthy of that confidence, then allow yourself to be inspired by that, because this is the promise of the Buddhist path. Be careful of finding fault with things that are not really worthy of finding fault with. It's so easy to find fault with things that are just insignificant, that don't actually matter, they're not really relevant. You forget the big picture. Look at the big picture, and then you can find that inspiration there. So this is the beauty here, and it says in the suttas, of course, the most inspiring all people is the arahant, right? The fully awakened person according to Buddhism. This is the most inspiring person of all, because basically they never get angry, they never have any greed, they're always calm and peaceful. It's a wonderful thing, and it says that even seeing an arahant in the world, even just laying your eyes on an arahant is enough to inspire enormous confidence, because you've seen something which is unusual. Such people don't normally exist, right? Everybody gets upset now and again. Everybody has some desires now and again. But here is someone who's completely different. You think, boy, what's going on here? Something amazing, something astonishing is going on. And then it gives rise to the sense that there's something here very powerful beyond this world, something that you too would like to have a part of, right? That's what it feels like. That's why it is so inspiring to see someone like that. It's very powerful, and it gives a kind of oomph to your practice, carries you forward, and it does something very powerful. So that is the last person, the one who inspires confidence in every way. The word there is the Samanta Pasadika, and this is also the name of one of the commentaries that were written by Buddhaghosa. The Vinaya commentary is called the Samantapasadika. I think what is meant here is like people who are the Aryas, the Arahants, and I'm not sure if the Vinaya commentary is as inspiring as the Arahants, to be quite frank. But anyway, that is the title he chose for that book, and this is where he got it from, this particular passage, in case you were interested in that. Anyway, so these, friends, are the 5 ways of removing resentment, by means of which a bhikkhu can entirely remove resentment towards whomever it has arisen. Everyone is included in this.